as we know, the end of last week, we had the NFL schedule released. We thought the best way to proceed with this podcast was to do a spoiler cast for week one. Go game by game, talk through what we are most excited for, what we cannot wait to see in those week one matchups, and then each of us will pick that singular game. Ian has 6, I have 5, and Daigle has 5. Should we get started?
Let's do it.
All right. Thursday, September 10th. As of now, on the calendar, let's preface every single game by saying that the Houston Texans travel to the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, who are 10.5-point favorites here at home. Ian Hartitz, this is your game.
Yeah, and the thing that sticks out from, these teams to me is that the Texans just did absolutely nothing to improve the league's single worst defense in yards allowed per play last season. I mean, we're once again, another year, we're just praying that J.J. Watt plays 16 games, which he's done once in the last 4 seasons. And it's not like he's been playing 14 or 15 games. I mean, the guy's suffering an extreme injury on almost a yearly basis at this point. So they added a couple of D linemen in the top 3 rounds, re-signed Bradley Roby. But, I know it's a scoring league, offense first, but the fact Houston just did nothing with their defense entering now the last season, they're not going to have to pay Deshaun Watson a huge amount of money. It's just sad. It's just the latest of, puzzling moves by Bill O'Brien.
It's a double-edged sword because on one hand, if this game commences on time, it will have commenced on time. Like everyone will have no Sean Marino tears because the season started and we survived the long 3-month offseason. But at the same time, you're looking and then you see it's Bill O'Brien on national television to kick off the season. And it's like, oh, well, we have to look forward to this, I guess. And remember, when these two teams met in the regular season, not the postseason, the Texans beat the Chiefs because they ran the ball 41 times behind Carlos Hyde's 26 carries. Carlos Hyde's no longer around. That pits David Johnson in that situation. So if we're ready for 30-plus carries of David Johnson, then by all means, let's kick off the season right now.
And Tim Kelly is a name that, your average NFL fan might not know, but he's going to be a pivotal piece in the Houston Texans organization this year because he's the new offensive coordinator. We talk so much about this being the Bill O'Brien offseason. What if 2020 is the Tim Kelly year? Because we talk about it all the time on the show, how nothing has been easy at all for Deshaun Watson in any game. You just go back to that playoff game, and he's forced to hold on to the football after that primary read and hope something happens. Maybe that was on, Bill O'Brien. Maybe that was on Deshaun Watson. But I truly hope that Tim Kelly has the ability now to make some simple first read throws, hit the back foot like Jared Goff or Jimmy Garoppolo, because a DeAndre Hopkins-less Texans team now is going to rely on David Johnson and Duke Johnson out of the backfield to Kenny Stills and Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller. And, I just hope that it's going to be an easier way of life for Deshaun Watson in 2020 in the Houston Texans offense.
Yeah, you can see how it might work out for the Texans offense, not having to, force feed the ball to Hopkins. Obviously, we saw plenty of production come out of that strategy, but there's speed everywhere. Again, though, it's just, to me, you don't need to have an elite defense, but the Texans defense, especially if JJ goes down, is just garbage. So I'm picking this one. The line I saw was Chiefs 10.5, which, is a little high. I would much prefer to spread if it was under 10, but I still got to go with the Chiefs. They pretty much just reloaded the entire team from last year with the exception of 1 or 2 starters. It's how can we pick against Mahomes? The guy is an ill-timed D Ford offside penalty away from potentially being a 2-time Super Bowl winner in 2 years. So
also the highest over-under of the entire week one.
What is it?
6.5.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Next up, Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons. Seahawks on the road here, favored by a point. John Daigle, this is yours.
Well, we get to see rookie and perhaps overdrafted A.J. Terrell take on King DK Metcalf on the outside himself. So overall, it's a rough start for the Falcons to host the Seahawks, who, yes, we've talked about their shoddy pass protection and what the team did or didn't do to shore it up. However, at the end of the day, if you have Russell Wilson, that's all that matters. Honestly, none of the metrics matter. If you have Russell Wilson, you will be in the playoffs competing. And so I am sort of scared, to be honest, to watch this Falcons defense in a season opener.
And we've seen Russ throughout this offseason kind of be more honest than usual towards not his disdain. That's probably too harsh of a word, but him wanting to open up this offense. He had a Super Bowl interview during that week in Miami with PFT where he basically said, I love watching the Kansas City Chiefs offense because they let Patrick Mahomes cook. Are we going to see that here in week one? Most likely not, right? Even though, Chris Carson's coming off an injury. Rashad Penny's coming off an injury. If there was ever a point to let Russell Wilson do Russell Wilson things immediately rather than in just the second half of games when you're trying to work in negative game script, it's here in week one against an Atlanta Falcons defense that has many, many issues over the years on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Falcons defense isn't going to be any better this year, but you know what that means? More pass attempts from Matt Ryan, and we got the second most available targets in the league. So I got this one circled on the calendar because it's going to be the week that everyone realizes that 2020 Calvin Ridley is just 2019 Chris Godwin. The guy is going to completely ball out. He's only had 8 career games with at least 8 targets. He has cleared 70 yards with at least 5 catches in every single one of those games and scored in all but one of them. He is so just good. I mean, the knock on Ridley coming out of college was, do you want to draft an older prospect with like a first-round pick? The guy's 25 years old right now. It's not like he's some grandpa, and now he's going to have the biggest role of his career in what should be a pass-happy offense. I'm so excited to watch Calvin Ridley in 2020.
Dago, before you make this pick, PFF posted this tweet recently where the Seahawks by far and away led the NFL last season in base personnel, meaning basically 3 linebackers on the field. That was 69% of their defensive snaps last year. The second highest rate was the Arizona Cardinals at 38%. Think about that. It was a 31% difference in base personnel towards that second team, and the average across the league was 27%. And so while everyone else, all 31 teams are doing one thing, the Seahawks are doing another. And it's not like they're going to change that because they invested in it even more by drafting Jordan Brooks in the first round. So again, while everyone is zigging, the Seahawks are zagging, and I don't know if it's in the right direction.
And while Jordan Brooks struggles to defend 2020 Darren Waller and Hayden Hurst, I am taking the Seahawks in this for a win.
Do you have because the spread, again, is just 1 on the road. Do you think that is fair here, John Daigle?
I think it's fair. Yeah, Falcons still hosting a game indoors. However, again, I'm not picking against Seahawks here. I want to see what the Falcons defense can do. Give me one game of that.
Next game, I have it. The Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens, with the Ravens at home, favored by 8.5 points here. Do we remember? It seems like forever ago, but do you remember that the Ravens started last year just 2-2, started with 2 wins and then 2 losses, and their final loss of the regular season was to these Cleveland Browns. And really, the Browns' excuses, they're over, right? I mean, Freddie Kitchens is out the door. Now they have 2 new tackles to protect Baker Mayfield. You have another year of Odell Beckham in the backfield, and hopefully, on the field. And then in the backfield, you have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. My biggest question is this. The Ravens spent all offseason reinvesting in their interior of their defense after getting run over by Derrick Henry to the tune of 195 yards. Calais Campbell, Patrick Queen, can they shut down the likes of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in week 1 against the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, it's a good question on that side of the ball, but it's a good question on the other side of the ball because this Browns run defense we saw at the end of last season was just one of the worst units in it. Like, they were Carolina Panthers, Jacksonville Jaguars bad. I mean, after Myles Garrett got suspended and not faithful, Thursday night game against Mason Rudolph, they allowed 92, 124, 179, 226, 243, and 179 rushing yards in their final 6 games. So I think with Garrett, we're talking about a true potential defensive MVP if he can put together 16 games playing as well as he can play. I think he is good enough to make up for the rest of the, ho-hum defensive line. And don't look now, but we're going to have 2 healthy high-round cornerbacks in Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams. I mean, both them had hamstring injuries almost from the get-go last year. So it's an interesting question in the whole pass rush versus coverage debate. I know the Patriots in recent years have really flooded their resource in corners. Then we see the 49ers show how dangerous you can be if you can get pressure with 4 guys. The Browns, if they stay healthy, quietly, kind of have a good amount of talent at both those spots.
One game doesn't tell the whole story, but it's still a battle within a war. And so just to watch Baker Mayfield in his first game in this entirely new offense and what we are hoping, expecting to be a bounce back year for him will be an exciting watch. And remember, they didn't even have Kareem Hunt for that first win in Baltimore last year that they just leaned on Nick Chubb for. So more 2 tight end sets with Njoku and Austin Hooper, a new offense under Kevin Stefanski. I'm very excited given the extremely tough challenge against the Ravens defense that Baker will have in week 1.
And again, we're going to learn a lot about Baker Mayfield, and this is an instant test, right? Against this Ravens secondary, which was among the best last year in the NFL. Obviously, you have Earl Thomas, who has somehow become one of the best blitzing safeties in the league. You have Marcus Peters, who is, ready to take a pick six at any point. Just one final note to close before I pick. We saw the jump that Lamar Jackson made last year. What's the jump this year? Is it getting even more pass-catching weapons involved? I mean, Marquise Brown lit it up last year in week 1. Could we get a Miles Boykin? Could we get other players involved? Maybe even a Justice Hill. I'm very excited to see what this Ravens team does in this second year under Greg Roman. I'll pick the Ravens, but I think 8.5 is a bit steep here to start, because I don't know how, especially with a shortened running game and off season, I don't know if the Ravens offense is going to be, and how can it, right? How can it be just as good as it ended last season, minus that playoff game, of course. All right, Ian, you're up next. New York Jets at the Buffalo Bills. The Bills at home, favored by 6.
So I think these offenses, if the Jets, who they just threw a ton of resources at their offensive line, Darnold still 22 years old, I think. I mean, year 3 coming up for Darnold. If the Jets really reach their ceiling on offense, I think they'll be as good as the Bills will be on offense. On defense, it's not even close right now. The Jets really didn't do anything to improve their just terrible defense. They have Jamal Adams, but every single week we're just hearing like new trade rumors about the guy. I mean, it reminds me of Jacksonville. Any good defensive player that emerges with the Jets is seemingly on the trade block next week. I don't quite get it, but yeah, I just think it has to be the Bills, and I think the Bills should be everyone's favorite in the AFC East. It's just an incredibly complete roster from top to bottom. I mean, just this defense, the continuity they have kind of reminds me of what we saw from the Vikings over these last 5 years. It's a hard-nosed football team, great home field advantage in Buffalo, and they're just playing a Jets team that I think, again, is just pretty much worse across the board unless they truly hit their ceiling.
It's Adam Gase's supposed new and improved offense versus a Bills defense that ranked number 5 in Football Outsiders DVOA metric last year and arguably only improved. Even adding small pieces like pass rusher Mario Addison is an improvement for behind their starting defensive line. So although I am very excited to watch Sam Darnold in year 3 to see what he comes up with, it's still somewhat concerning in this spot.
I think if you're an optimistic Jets fan, you make the case that you're where the Bills were last year, because the Jets just spent a ton of money on one position group, their offensive line, like the Bills did heading in to 2019. They've taken middling shots at wide receiver and Rashad Perryman, and where they selected Denzel Mims at the end of round 2. Meanwhile, the Bills did that with John Brown and Cole Beasley. The question is, are those pieces going to align like they did for the Bills last year with the Jets this year? And in many cases and many occasions, that doesn't happen. And, I also wonder if the Jets are as well coached as the Bills were last year, right? Sean McDermott, we've seen, is one of the best defensive play callers and defensive organizers across the NFL. And Brian Daboll knew the strengths of Josh Allen and knew the weaknesses of Josh Allen. I'm not sure if I can say the same thing for Greg Williams and Adam Gase in the Jets scenario. So I'm a little bit worried. But again, if you're an optimist, you say, hey, the Jets can be what the Bills were last year.
It's going to go under the radar, but Logan Ryan, perhaps if he signs anywhere else, you just scoff at the signing. But the fact that he's been linked heavily to the Jets now is actually somewhat sneaky for the Greg Williams defense, because he, like Jamal Adams, a poor man Jamal Adams at corner, can move all around that defensive alignment. They're basically 2 secondary pieces who play inside the box atop their position. So I think it does make it interesting, although this probably ain't it if you're trying to match Josh Allen, to be honest.
Right. Okay, Ian, you have this game. Pick it.
I'm picking the Jets against the spread. I think the Bills win, but 6 points is just pretty steep when we're backing a quarterback who, as we know, with the entire team's playoff hopes on the line, will lateral the ball over his head to no one. He'll launch a bomb in the double coverage to his fullback, and then the next play he'll evade 3 tacklers and make a throw that maybe only Mahomes and a couple other guys in the league are even capable of making. So it's just a Josh Allen roller coaster, and we love it, but expecting to get 6 points against, again, a team that could be potentially as good as them if all things break their way, I'm not laying this.
I've seen the tweets lately, Ian. You're in on this Josh Allen coaster. Like, you're in on the entertainment factor much more than the poise, pocket, perfect passer that everyone wants every quarterback to be. No, let's have some variance. Let's have some fun, and let's enjoy Josh Allen be Josh Allen.
Amen to that.
There we go. John Daigle, you're up next. Las Vegas Raiders at the Carolina Panthers. This is, I think, the only pick'em game of the weekend.
The total right now is 46.5, and that just seems far too low. There's only
way too low.
There is literally only one way this game goes, and that's the Raiders build a big lead behind Josh Jacobs, who isn't going to play passing downs, but they're not going to stop him on the ground. And then the Panthers are forced to put their foot on the gas and let Teddy go through the air and attack this questionable secondary. So I like the over. I love Teddy Bridgewater in a week 1 sneaky spot if you're taking notes for 3 months from now. And, I think this is actually going to be a dumb, exciting game for everyone.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm with John here with the Teddy being in a sneaky spot. I mean, you look at his kind of best ball average draft position, he's going like bottom, outside the top 25 almost. And he is a massive upgrade over Kyle Allen. That's how bad Kyle Allen was last season. I mean, I understand Teddy checks down a lot, but there's a lot of good quarterbacks that do that. And he's still, if the Panthers were the league's worst team by 5% in catchable deep ball passes last season. I mean, even if Teddy isn't throwing as frequently, he's going to complete more deep passes just because he's a better deep ball thrower than we saw from Kyle Allen. This offense, as we talked about with Cam going the last 2 seasons, has a ton of dudes that can create after the catch. I mean, there's a scenario where the Panthers aren't complete trash. I think they could be feisty enough if things click on offense, and Joe Brady is as good as everyone keeps talking about Joe Brady being. I think this could be a shootout because we got 2 defenses that can't stop anyone and 2 offenses that, even if we like to make fun of their quarterbacks a lot for not throwing deep, can still rack up yards.
They're exciting. Yep.
We all came up with these reasonings and pieces of information separately for this. I wasn't expecting all 3 of us to really be excited about Teddy Bridgewater, but here I am. We haven't seen Teddy be a full-time starter since the 2015 season. And we had 2 years of Teddy B at that time as a legit NFL starter. And it was a promising start to his career. Yeah, unspectacular, but I think promising, right? And then you had 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019 since, and he's barely played. And it's such a rare career arc where we are with Teddy right now, right? Someone who started his first 2 years, he didn't get benched because of his play. He got benched because of an injury. And now we've had to wait 4 seasons spot across the league. So what are we going to see from him, right? And I'm not expecting this playmaker like Cam Newton out there, and he's not going to be Cam Newton, and that's going to be wild to see a quarterback under center mentality necessarily. But obviously, the Panthers believe he's a great fit with Joe Brady. The biggest question to me is if he can maximize those vertical threats that they have in Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson after being last in the NFL in intended air yards per throw last year.
The jury's out on long term, but as we've talked about in this game in particular, it's just a sweet spot to come out the gates firing. And that's why personally for picking, I do have the Raiders winning this one by 3 points or less, just because it seems like a spot they get the job done, knowing that west to east doesn't matter for your circadian rhythm. However, I am very, very excited to watch, like I said.
We didn't really say much about this Raiders offense. The Panthers, Ian, we've talked about it a lot. Their defense is not in good shape right now. And so you could see Josh Jacobs go close to 200 yards in this opening weekend. I mean, if they just maintain positive game script with that offensive line talent that they showed last year, and the Panthers stick with this same, I mean, they might even be worse on defense than they had last year. And that would be a major, major issue for this team.
And credit to Carolina for recognizing this and using every single draft pick on the defense. But I'm just not expecting those guys in week 1, especially, to provide much of a boost. So, yeah, this is a sneaky shootout for sure.
Next game is the Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions, with the Lions as 1.5-point home favorites. Matthew Stafford was on fire to start last year. 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in his first 8 games. And while the second half was absolute trash, right? I mean, that's why they ended up with the number 3 overall pick. I'm still more optimistic of this Lions team, despite that second half performance, than I am of the teams. Maybe that means I'm just too low on the Bears, and I don't know what I'm talking about with the Bears. But I have no enthusiasm for this Mitchell Trubisky and whoever they want to trot out and Nick Foles as the competition for from that group at all.
And Stafford also propelled Kenny Golladay to the overall wide receiver 11 in fantasy through those first 8 games. And remember, their biggest, most notable name offseason addition on offense in particular was DeAndre Swift, whose strength is a pass-catching back. So I think Stafford's being very underlooked in offseason startups and best ball drafts. I have him as a top 10 guy right now, assuming he can stay healthy, of course. But we shook that health label a long time ago, since last year was the first time in quite a while that he went down early. So, no, I do genuinely love this offense. Yes, like you said, the Bears defense, they were expected to regress last year. They did heavily, and it's going to be interesting to see what they can do this upcoming year. But I love the Lions offense.
Before Stafford got hurt last year, the Lions were 3-4-1, but that included that Monday night just robbery against the Packers that, could have even been overturned. It was so ridiculous. And a Chiefs game where, they fumbled the ball on the 1-yard line. Chiefs housed it 99 yards. That was a wild game. They could have beat the Chiefs at home. I think the Vikings, we can expect to be worse than last season. The Bears and the Packers. The only thing we can really say about the Lions that's negative is, okay, the defense, Patricia, and they're the Lions. So I guess that's 3 things. But these other teams now finally have stuff going against them as well. Again, if Stafford can stay healthy, he was the best quarterback in this division last year when he was playing. Only Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson were the better MVP candidates. So, it feels so scary to kind of be in on the Lions this year. But with how cheap Stafford is in fantasy and with how low their odds are kind of across the board anyway, yeah, I'm a Detroit Lions fan in 2020. Let's do it, guys.
We also get our first headache of Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift in this game. Speaking of the running game, it's not just the Trubisky-Foles factor we have to talk about. It's the David Montgomery doing absolutely nothing in his rookie season and getting no yards blocked for him, right? That's a major question when you don't have a passing game that is successful week to week, when you also don't have a running game that's successful week to week. Again, I could be just way too low on the Bears and not know what I'm talking about. Just not overly excited about what they bring to the table in 2020. So because of that, I am going with the Lions to start off this season with a field goal win over the Bears.
Real quickly on Montgomery, the dude averaged over 4 yards per carry twice in the first 11 weeks of last season, 4 times in his last 5 games. I feel like we all saw Miles Sanders get a lot better, but Montgomery quietly did too. Tariq Cohen was worse than Leonard Fournette, dead last among all receivers that had 100 targets and yards per target last year. Please get Tariq off the field. He's a fun little gadget guy, but I'm not sailing in on Montgomery just yet.
I'm not either because obviously in college you had him break tackles and create yards on his own. But I think it goes back to just how poor the run blocking was last year. And I'm not sure if they answered that many questions and brought in enough talent to fix that problem heading into 2020. But who knows?
He only broke 55 tackles on 267 touches. But Ryan Pace, who says a lot of things, don't get me wrong, but at least in his post-combine presser, said that they believe Montgomery can handle an even larger workload this upcoming year. So he has the volume, and that's what we're buying into.
In Harditz, the Indianapolis Colts as 7-point favorites on the road to the Jacksonville Jaguars is up next.
So I really wish that Gardner Minshew wasn't being forced to play for this organization that just by all accounts wants to lose as much as possible in 2020, because he was not only fun as a rookie, but he was legitimately more efficient than most rookie quarterbacks we've seen. Since 2000, minimum 8 starts, we've only seen Dak, RG3, Big Ben, Russ, Nick Mullins, Matt Ryan, Baker, and Mariota average more adjusted yards per attempt than Gardner did last year. There were some problems. He's got to do a better job not fumbling so much. And, behind that offensive line, he kind of looked like a deer caught in the headlights towards the end of the season. But Chark looked like a legit monster for stretches. We got Jay Gruden coming in. We've seen him do some good things scheme-wise over the years. Hopefully we don't see triple-digit targets being checked down to Leonard freaking Fournette again. I want to be more in on Gardner because I do think he can be a good quarterback. But the question is, what are we getting from this Jacksonville team that, again, just seems to want to lose?
Ian will have the official pick at the end, but early spoiler pick is that the Jaguars, pent up with 3 months of boiling rage at the NFL, robbed them of the annual Thursday night Titans game. What the hell is going on? They come out firing in a much better offense That includes Laviska Shenault over Dede Westbrook from the slot. That includes Chris Thompson coming on the field over Leonard Fournette on passing downs, if Fournette's even on the team in week 1. And remember, Minshew, he did struggle when he came off cold off the bench for Nick Foles last year, but did close the year against the Colts in particular with an impressive blowout game. I think he has 260 yards and 3+ touchdowns. So, no, I love Minshew this offseason. Everything that's happened this offseason for the Jaguars is a win for Minshew, at least for this year, and I will continue liking him in this game.
You don't really believe any words you just said. You don't believe that, Daigle.
I am personally extremely upset. Do you not remember that Fournette had 14 carries for negative 11 yards and then had 69 yards the next 2 carries? They robbed us of that goal. I'm extremely upset.
You're also optimistic about the Jaguars, which I find insane because
I do like the Jaguars.
I think these two teams are just headed in complete opposite directions, right? You have the Jaguars where, Ian, you and I have talked about all the time. This is not a team that wants to win in 2020. That's different in tanking. It's just who they are at this point, and the ownership has done nothing to try to change the tide of the direction that they're going in right now. Meanwhile, you have the Colts who have kind of played it slow the last 2 years, but now added potentially pillar pieces in DeForest Buckner defensively. Then you have Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor in round 2. And Phillip Rivers, who's in the final 2 years basically of his career, who's already signed on to be a head coach at the high school level after his playing days are over. They are all in on these 2 years. So again, it's two teams, separate directions. And I don't know how you can even consider covering a spread for a team that is set up how they are right now in Jacksonville. And I know the Colts, didn't light the world on fire in 2019, but 7 points in this week 1 with veterans basically at every single position and a very good offensive line. Give me the Colts easily.
Yeah, I got to go with the Colts here too. I do think their defense might be legit sooner rather than later. Adding Buckner, we already have Darius Leonard playing at an all-pro level every single year. And the chance for Malik Hooker, one of the best, getting comped to Ed Reed coming out of college. Just an incredible ball-hawking free safety. He needs to do something now because they declined his 5th-year option. But, he's out there. We're hearing some, signs that the organization's in him. That's a very strong defense up the middle if those guys play to their abilities. And, yeah, I'm not really in on Phillip Rivers having this great season. I don't think this passing game, they're talking, we're going to run through 31-year-old T.Y. Hilton again. Like, he's going to be the alpha dog. I wish he wasn't the alpha dog. Give me someone else to throw to. But best offensive line in the league probably against a team that just could not stop the run to save their lives last season. I got the Colts.
The reason why I like the Jaguars, for fun's sake, is because their range of outcomes is wild. Like, they're literally the Cleveland Indians from Major League. It's like they have Wild Thing Ricky Vaughn and Willie Mays Hayes and Pedro Serrano because they have Yannick Ngakoue, if he sticks around, on the opposite side of Josh Allen. Like, that's a fortifying pass rush right there, not to mention Minshew making wild plays off the cuff with exciting young players. So, yes, I just enjoy the Jaguars. I'm sorry, Josh.
I don't know. The win gap between 3 to 6 isn't that large to me, John Daigle, and that's what the Jaguars are staring at.
What if they mess around and make the AFC Championship?
Who are you right now? That? What has happened to you in the last week?
Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? That is like a triple, quadruple down on statements you made. I love it. I love that you just wanted to throw that out there. And I certainly hope that is a little bit that is clipped from all this without context. That would be wonderful.
I'm here for the Jags being fun. I'm with you there, John, but you keep that AFC Championship out of your mouth.
What if they mess around, guys?
One final note. Paris Campbell and Michael Pittman are basically 2 rookie wide receivers in this. We didn't see Paris Campbell do anything last year, so getting 2 new playmakers in this offense could get a lot of fun. Ian, did you pick this one yet?
Yeah, I picked the Colts.
Good. Smart man. Sane man, too, I might add. Sane man. John Daigle, you're next. Let's stay on the reservation here. The Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings, with the Vikings as 3.5-point home favorites here.
3.5 seems like a lot because this is a line that credits the 2019 Vikings and not the 2020 version that literally lost, as we've talked about in the past, their entire nickel set. Like, they lost all 3 starting corners from last year's defense. Like, yes, they'll probably still have a strong pass rush, but I'm concerned because, as we know, when betting week 1, you typically try to look at the offseason storylines that have culminated to paint the wrong picture for one side. And this offseason is going to paint the Packers as one of the league's worst offenses. And perhaps that's the case. but they still have Aaron Rodgers. Like at worst, they're probably a median offense, right? And so I just think the Packers are going to be bet heavily against, given the narrative coming into the league season opener. And I kind of like the Packers to hang around against this defense that we project to be worse, and for it to be a sneaky shootout, because if the defense is worse, this new cast Vikings offense that's going to run more 12 personnel with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen on the outside is probably going to have to throw more as opposed to running the ball like they want to.
This Packers team is going to be a story week to week, especially if they lose. If they lose in week 1, lose in week 2, lose in week 3, it's going to be some entertainment for all of us on the outside that, don't have a rooting interest in the Green Bay Packers. So I'm here for it. I'm here for the chaos. I'm here for the Aaron Rodgers versus Matt LaFleur story that is going to be unfolding like in front of our eyes on the television screen, because it's clear that Matt LaFleur wants a quarterback who is not Aaron Rodgers at this time, right? Where Rodgers has relied so much on outside of structure, making the home run throw nearly every single time. And all Matt LaFleur wants is basically his own Jimmy Garoppolo, someone who can work inside the structure and hit the open receiver in the timing of an offense. Okay, let's see how that plays out. And I'm just going to love seeing it on a weekly basis.
I think the fantasy community as a whole is sleeping hard on Adam Thielen right now, because this is a guy who did not miss a career game until last season. He has the hamstring injury, but he gets healthy enough to come back and legit play great against both the Saints and the 49ers. Now, biggest competition for targets, Stephon Diggs, is gone. I understand the concerns where, we have him with Juju. When a great wide receiver leaves the offense, more attention is going to go on the other guy, this and that. I think we've seen enough from Adam Thielen as a route runner, contested catch artist, just a great player that, look, if this guy is in line for 130-plus targets, which I do think he is, then we got to trust it, because Gary Kubiak, as great of a run game wizard as he is, I think we're putting too much into the fact that Stephon Diggs only had 94 targets on this team last year. They were kind of a fluky, unique 94 targets because they were so far downfield. Kubiak's wide receiver 1 in his career average, even with the Diggs 94 targets in there, has averaged 138 targets per season. He's enabled a top 12 PPR wide receiver in 12 of 23 seasons, top 24 in 19 of 23. Rod Smith, Andre Johnson, even Steve Smith with the Ravens. Demaryius Thomas later. Kubiak knows how to involve a true wide receiver 1 in his offense. That's exactly what Adam Thielen is. I think the big 5 in fantasy are in some order. Okay, this order: Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones, and one more I'm freaking forgetting.
Evans, but Godwin.
Hopkins, Godwin.
Hopkins 5. I think Adam Thielen is number 6. We have the same quarterback that we have seen him produce top 10 wide receiver numbers with as recently as 2 years ago. Less competition, and he's a great player. Sign me up for Adam Thielen 2020.
Dago, pick the game.
You make a good argument, but man, that means putting Cooper. I'm looking at it now. Cooper, Ridley, Juju, DJ Moore, Kenny Golladay over Thielen. Like I can't do that. I'm sorry.
All those guys have significantly more competition for targets
and are probably better players. Okay,
stop it.
Let's go here. Hold on. Which game am I picking now? Vikings and Packers. I am going Packers because they have the hook, right? It's 3.5. You said
they do.
Yeah, I'm taking the hook. I'm going Packers.
Next up, the Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots. Patriots here favored by 6.5. You might have heard that Tom Brady's no longer the quarterback of the New England Patriots, but the last time the Patriots took the field in the regular season, they lost to these overachieving Miami Dolphins team led by Brian Flores. I think the biggest question is if we see Tua immediately. Do we see this first-round quarterback that it's all been leading up to for the Dolphins to select in his first game of his career against this Patriots secondary, which is still loaded with talent, still one of the best units across the NFL, including the Defensive Player of the Year and Stephon Gilmore? Or is it going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick and Chan Gailey reuniting with this offense? I'm fascinated to see. Obviously, you have the quarterback carousel on the Patriots side, but you also have that defense. Can they go back on the streak? And no, they cannot. But can they get close to what they were in the first 10 to 12 games of last year? And how does Miami's offense respond, especially if Tua is involved?
I'm just happy we're seeing this line, 6.5. Patriots win total this season, set at 9. Can we please, just everyone, the Patriots are not tanking. That's not happening. They are not going to try to go 1-15 or 2-14 or whatever it would have to be to get Trevor Lawrence. Now, maybe I agree that ceiling isn't as high as usual. I'm not saying Jarrett Stidham is the answer or anything like that, but if you don't trust us, trust the guys in Vegas who are trying to make as much money as possible, and they are indicating the Patriots are again going to be a contending team.
I just don't know what this Patriots team is, and I'm looking forward to finding out. But we can assume, I guess, 12 personnel with 2 rookie tight ends. Maybe Sony Michel, 20-plus carries a game. Maybe he splits with Damian Harris, who totaled four carries as a rookie last year. Maybe James White's taken off the field, or they use him more. Like, I really don't know. And so that just leaves me troubled to pick either side in this situation.
You also get Jarrett Stidham against Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, and Noah I. Maybe like the 3 corners that have the largest investment across the NFL. And we immediately are going to see what Jarrett Stidham is made of. And because of that, I'm taking against the points. Against the points, I'm taking the Miami Dolphins here. Outright, I'll take the Patriots at home. But against the points and the spread, I will go with Dolphins.
Is Noah I his unofficial nickname?
That's what I'm going with because
I like it a lot, actually.
I think it's Igbo is his nickname, but
there's
Noah
an N
I.
in there, and it's Igbo, it's just silent N, like the Pam.
In Josh's world, it is.
Okay, I like Noah I, to be fair.
All right, well, let's roll with it here on the Rotoworld Football Podcast. All right, we're about over halfway through. Ian Hartis, you're up next. Philadelphia Eagles, 6.5 on the road favorites against the Washington Redskins.
So I think the Eagles, other than the Saints, are the team to beat in the NFC. I really think they're that good. They filled their holes on defense. They got Wentz multiple solid field stretchers. Everything's pointing upwards for Philly. But I want to talk about this Washington defensive line that is suddenly full of scary monsters. I mean, we got Chase Young here, 2020 second overall pick. Last year, we have Montez Sweat, who fell and was a steal at the 26th overall pick. 2018, we had Alabama DT Jerome Payne go 13th in the first round. Jonathan Allen went 17th in the first round the year before that. The whole time we've had Ryan Kerrigan being around, being a stud. Matt Ioannidis, however you say his name, he was arguably the best defensive lineman on the field last year. Ryan Anderson isn't bad. There's a lot of questions with Haskins and how the offense is going to do and if this Washington team can never really get over the hump. But, you're a really bad team for a long time. You get these high draft picks, and Washington has used almost all of them on defensive linemen that, even if they're still a little bit unproven, I think we can agree these are some talented beasts there in the middle. And if Washington can stay healthy and just get average quarterback play from Dwayne Haskins, I don't see them being this 3-13 pushover. I don't think they're going to I'm not here making a Jacksonville AFC championship call for the Redskins or anything, but I can see them being a frisky team that flirts with 500.
Isn't that what we saw from the 49ers, though? And that's such a difficult style of roster to build. And I think the biggest difference is that you don't have Kyle Shanahan at head coach, and you don't have him orchestrating the offense. Chase Young is a very good prospect. But, Ian, let me ask you, how much of a difference in the win-loss column do you think Chase Young is going to bring to the table right now in comparison to adding offensive weapons, offensive playmakers? Because the offense, despite trying to go get Amari Cooper, is basically the same. And I don't know if we're going to see the same exact Terry McLaurin in terms of production as we saw during his rookie year. He was absolutely fantastic. I just worry that, and I think it's pretty clear in an easy estimation, that this Redskins offense is going to keep back what the rest, namely the defensive side of the ball, talent brings to the table.
I mean, yeah, all right, the offensive questions, not having Shanahan, those are all huge. I agree the win-loss difference maybe isn't as big if they had taken a stab on Tua and just gone pure quarterback upside. But we saw how Nick Bosa last year, just adding one just complete monster to an already really great defensive line, can just make that one of the best units in the league. So, we were talking a bit earlier about, pass rush versus coverage. This would be a good study to be looking at because, it's rough. If we look at the linebacker, I mean, maybe Reuben Foster comes back, but who knows? But the secondary, rough in Washington. So they need this D-line to be as beastly as they look on paper.
Could be interesting long-term, but for week one, it's just like how talent deficient they are on offense, plus trying to mix in Antonio Gibson and Antonio Gandy Golden in week one seems like a stretch, especially against an Eagles defense that only got better, and among many names, adding Javon Hargrave and Darius Slay to the mix. So I am concerned for Washington in this game in particular, but long-term, sure. I'd like to see how everything pans out.
Well, and you have to throw in Adrian Peterson and J.D. McKissick and Darius Geis and
Jeremy Sprinkle.
Yeah, these are all just little additions that I don't think really move the needle at all. And again, we've talked about it a lot. Scott Turner, I think, is solid, but what is he working with right now? What is he working with? On the Eagles side, we saw Deshaun Jackson light it up in week 1 last year. I mean, it was the game of the season, obviously for him, because it was his only game of the season. But he showed why he was brought in to this Eagles offense. It was explosive. It was exciting. And the Eagles doubled down on it. I mean, you add a Jalen Reagor, you add a John Hightower, you add a Marquise Goodwin. So seeing what Carson Wentz can do with those types of pass-catching weapons to go along with maybe Alshon Jeffrey and obviously Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, instead of just throwing the ball to Greg Ward, that's extremely exciting, especially given the hype that Wentz got last year. And I think he's still one of the top quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, I mean, what should we expect him to do with that? Maybe play like the MVP candidate he was in 2017. I got the Eagles here with the points, -6. Wouldn't be shocked if Washington keeps it closer. I mean, I wouldn't say put the entire bankroll on this. But one quick thing about Wentz, too, like, be careful about calling any player injury prone. Just look into it a little more. Because with Carson, I mean, he's gotten hurt from riding a four-wheeler, from trying to take on a linebacker at the goal line, then last year getting cheap shotted when he was trying to slide. So, like, there's quarterbacks that have obviously been much better bets to stay on the field than Wentz. But I would just be quick to write off any player, and your only kind of excuse is, he's injury prone. He probably won't last.
Well, the good news is I hear Wentz is coming off the field for 3 drives a game for Jalen Hurts, so he's going to stay healthy all year.
Los Angeles Chargers as 3-point road favorites against the Cincinnati Bengals are next. Daigle, new look for both teams, especially at quarterback this year.
It's just the beginning of a tough, impossible stretch run for Joe Burrow, who has to play the Browns, the Ravens, and the Steelers defenses twice. And now you start against this stalwart Chargers defense. Like, we don't know what their offense will be despite having special players across that unit, but their defense we know was already good. And it only projects to get better, and adding a number of names. Chris Harris being one of them, so on and so on. So, yeah, it's a daunting task for a rookie in a season opener who hasn't worked with his receivers. I cannot imagine the Bengals swinging this one.
And with shortened offseason programs, Joe Burrow might be the only rookie quarterback to start during week 1, right? Because Justin Herbert, if we go by what Anthony Lynn has said, almost assuredly Tyrod Taylor is starting in week 1. And Chan Gailey and Ryan Fitzpatrick have a connection and have a relationship. So who knows if Tua is going to start for the Miami Dolphins. But I think Joe Burrow can succeed immediately because of what he brings to the table in that his comfort in chaos. He obviously can work inside the flow of an offense, going to his primary, to his secondary, to his tertiary read. But then when everything is broken down around him, he wants to thrive. He wants to win. And he has this athleticism in those moments to create space and find big plays down the field. But there's a major difference between doing that against, Georgia's defense and doing that against a team that is made up of, the best Georgia players over the last decade, the LA Chargers secondary and defense, which is just loaded from top to bottom at every single level.
Yeah, I'm with you though, Josh. I'm coming around to the idea that Burrow can be, a very relevant fantasy contributor from the 2020 season on, because we've only had 6 QB1s as rookies since 2010. Cam Newton, Kyler, Dak, RG3, Russ Wilson, Andrew Luck. All those guys averaged at least 25 rushing yards per game in college. Again, Cam, Kyler, those guys are like generational talents rushing. I'm sorry for using generational. I hate myself for saying it as much as you hate me for saying it. But at least Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson, these guys can still give you something of a rushing floor. And the only 2 quarterbacks that were drafted highly this year that also averaged 25 rushing yards per game, Jalen Hurts, obviously, and Joe Burrow was quietly at 27. So I know he looks to pass first, obviously, but underrated chance, I think, for him to give us a decent rushing floor and with a really bad defense that's going to force him to throw the ball a lot. And with A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, John Ross, T. Higgins, of course, Auden Tate. We got weapons everywhere for him to throw the ball to. I'm coming around to Burrow. We're not going to see I think the Bengals flirt with, playoff spot or anything like that. But like Kyler was a QB1 last year in fantasy, I think we can see Burrow end up there when it's all said and done.
And Dave, before you pick, Zach Taylor has a chance. He has a chance to show his identity now. And lest we forget, what the Bengals did in week 1 last year. It might have been their best performance of the season. That first half, I believe, against the Seattle Seahawks, we were like, oh, this team is kind of fun. John Ross might have a breakout season. And then obviously they go in the tank the rest of the year. What if Zach Taylor, he puts his best foot forward in week 1s, and it could be here against the LA Chargers?
I mean, the Chargers are very prone to do Chargers things. There's no denying that. However, the Bengals are no Jaguars, so I am taking the Chargers here, minus the 3.5 to win this game.
Next up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to the New Orleans Saints. The Saints here are 5-point favorites. Guys, what a game. I mean, what a freaking game we have here in week 1. It's the new of the Bucs. They're new, I should say, because it's not like new players. It's your Tom Brady's, it's your Rob Gronkowski's to go along with your Chris Godwins and your Mike Evans. But it's also against the established. The Saints are basically unchanged. The Saints are who they are. So it's interesting, right? You have the Bucs who are now in this 1 to 2 year window versus the Saints who are basically in the final year of their window. They're in the same division. They play each other twice, and one of those times is in week 1. I don't know what to think. I have no idea how Brady is going to instantly translate his game, his style of offense, with not totally new players around him, but it is a totally new system around him. Obviously, it's going to be the Tom Brady system, but it's new players and a new environment to do it in. I don't know how I can lean away from the Saints here because, again, it's an established, very good team on both sides of the ball, and I always lean towards those in week 1.
Yeah, I think we're giving a little too much credit to the guy. Like, if I had to pick who has more wins, the Colts or the Buccaneers, I think I'd be more comfortable riding the Colts. I just think there's fewer questions around. Yeah, it's flashy in Tampa. You know, we have our 3 tight ends, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They're all great. But Brady was the worst version of him we've seen in 10-plus years last year. And, again, I don't think that was all his fault. We saw very little separation, banged up receivers all over the place, not as good as an offensive line as usual. But if we're saying at this point in his career that Brady's best attribute, Josh, is you love to harp on, is that he doesn't turn the ball over, I just don't know if that's going to lead to this, like, glamour, awesome regular season Tampa team that, yes, their defense was low-key a top 10 unit in some of these efficiency stats. Towards the end of last season, you know, they started to gel a little bit more. You know, Levante David, complete stud in the middle, having Devin White year 2. Defense could be all right, but I have a hard time believing this Buccaneers offense is going to be more than above average, to be honest.
It just comes down to hype saturating the market. And the Bucs team total, I believe it was 9.5, went far too high because of hype once Gronk again joined Tom Brady. And this team, again, in week 1 will probably be picked as an outright winner in New Orleans because of hype. And I'm not buying it either. I love the Saints in week 1, if only for the lack of continuity the Bucs will be walking into week 1 with.
It's worthwhile bringing up the Bucs young secondary and how they played towards the second half of last year. You know, Jamel Dean was fantastic at games. Carlton Davis really came to life in the second half. Well, look who they have to really go from being exciting and flashy to having some substance and long-term success against. You get Sean Payton and Drew Brees in week 1. Good luck to you. I'm going to go with the Saints by at least a touchdown here against the Bucs. Ian Hartitz, you're up next. Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers, again, went to the Super Bowl last year and are 8-point favorites here.
Yeah, it seems pretty steep, especially considering how well the Cardinals did play them last season. I mean, they lost both games, but it was only by a combined 13 points. And I think we saw, you know, the 49ers defense, they were so good before that first Cardinals game. And some of the success that Kyler had in the RPO game, you know, and just the offense kind of leaning on more outside runs, getting away from the teeth of that 49ers defense, you know, attacking them around the edges away from Bosa and those guys. They had a bunch of success with that. And we saw other teams that are RPO heavy have a bunch of success against the 49ers last season. So this would be a good test to find out, are the 2020 Cardinals going to be a legit contender, or are they just going to kind of be a fun team? You know, we've seen the comparisons. I've made the comparisons to the 2019 Browns. I think Kyler, his rushing floor is just so big. He's top 3, maybe it might be number 2 in rushing yards per game all time among quarterbacks. Like, he runs like very few people we've ever seen. His fantasy floor is fine because of that. I'm not worried about Kyler's fantasy production, but just as a team, didn't quite fix the offensive line as much as I would have liked to see. On defense, we're still leaning a lot on an aging Patrick Peterson that got better down the stretch, but certainly didn't look like the world beater he once was. Love Chandler Jones, but again, I think we're a year too early on the team hype of Arizona, as excited I am to watch Kyle Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, and company in this year too.
Plus, we're talking about two offenses, not the Cardinals defense. And remember, maybe it means nothing at all, but this is the same opponent that Garoppolo totaled 740 yards and 8 touchdowns against and 2 wins just last year and 2 competitive games nonetheless. So I would expect this one to be high scoring again. And it really comes down to what the new and improved Cardinals offense can do against the Niners defense.
Yeah, the Niners haven't gotten worse. I mean, DeForest Buckner to Javon Kinlaw hopefully is a 1-to-1 jump, right? And then offensively, you get rid of Matt Breida, but you still have Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert, and you add someone like Brandon Ayuk to continue that yards after catch dominance. Ian, to your point, Kyler Murray has jumped all the way up to 25-to-1 odds to be the MVP this season. I love me some Kyler Murray. That is very rich. I think it's all of us trying to find someone who can be this year's Lamar Jackson. But without odds in play, if you ask me to scan the league and say who has, of the talent level, who can completely take over a season from week 1 to week 17, both in the running game and more importantly, in the passing game, and do things that we don't see other quarterbacks do on a weekly basis, Kyler Murray is near the top of that list for sure.
Yeah, I mean, his highlight film last year, just the throws he was able to make, not as consistent as he needed to, but he made every single throw you could expect. And again, the rushing upside was there. I'm taking the Cardinals against the spread. I think 8's a little bit steep. I think the 49ers could be a little bit worse. I mean, I know they're returning a lot of the key pieces on defense. They addressed losing Buckner early in the draft, but we talk about this. Elite defenses like the 49ers were last year usually take a step back in the following year. It's just hard to be that good for multiple seasons in a row. They had to face 3 offenses in the division that could all feasibly be better than they were last year. Maybe Trent Williams, really helped solidify that O-line, makes them even better. Maybe Jimmy in his first full year, he's had a year to kind of get over the ACL injury. Now he's had a full offseason to get better again. Maybe we see Jimmy G start playing at the quarterback they pay him to be, but I don't know. At least for this week, give me the points.
John Daigle, you're up next. The Dallas Cowboys are 2.5-point favorites on the road against the Los Angeles Rams.
In the second highest total of the week, 50, because the Rams' new offense is where my intrigue immediately goes to. We know what we're getting from the Cowboys. We don't have to ask. They added CeeDee Lamb. They just got better on offense. But for the Rams, what happens here? Are we expecting more multi-tight end sets with Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett? Robert Woods running from every position on the field? Cooper Kupp perhaps struggling from the boundary and not playing too much slot if they do go to 2 tight end sets? Remember, the past 2 years alone, Cooper Kupp has averaged 1.6 and 1.3 yards per route run, one of the most predictive metrics, not only for fantasy, but for success as a wide receiver in the NFL from the outside, as opposed to averaging over 2 yards per route run from the slot where he works best. You've mentioned it before on this podcast, Josh. Cooper Kupp in college at Eastern Washington running against outside corners was an absolute mess. But is that the offense we're expecting? Or is Josh Reynolds and Van Jefferson suddenly going to take his spot and he'll play a sub 60% snap rate like he did over the last 8 games last year? So I think there's a lot to watch in this game in particular that go far beyond even mentioning CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. This Rams team is tough to figure out, man, because we've known who Sean McVay is really for the last, 2 or 3 years. It's, 11 personnel 90% of the time. That obviously shifted at times last year. But Matt Harmon just put out his reception perception on Cooper Kupp, right, and said that he's among the best in the NFL when facing zone coverage. Sure, that's easy releases, that's open space that you sit down in and you catch the football and you run after the catch. That's not minimizing what he's doing. He's very good in that area. Okay, what if, as you mentioned, Daigle, they go with Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett as their base set, or, run 2 wide receiver sets over 60, 70% of the time, 2 wide receiver sets. What are we going to get from Cooper Kupp? Is he going to go from one of the most bankable players week in and week out to someone who has a bit of a high variance, who's just not getting the same type of volume? I don't know. This Rams team, I don't know what to think of them because of how many changes Sean McVay made this offseason. And because of that, I'm more excited for them than I expected to be heading into 2020.
Yeah, I mean, as bad as bad as the Rams offense was last season, they were still the 11th best scoring unit in the league. I mean, they just weren't the 2017, 2018 world beaters we came to expect under McVay. So hopefully we can figure out this rotation early and, figure out who's going to be the fantasy studs. I'm interested to see if this Cowboys defense can be a little bit better than the masses have kind of given them credit for. Because right now we're hearing they're going to need to try to score 35 points per game, just win every shootout, which could be the case. But they did do a good job of throwing a lot of pieces at this defensive line. Now, there are a lot of veteran pieces. I know we shouldn't get our hopes up of players that couldn't latch on somewhere else, moving on to a new team. But adding Gerald McCoy, adding Dontari Poe to the middle. We got, fingers crossed, Alden Smith and Randy Gregory trying to fill out that defensive end spot across from Lawrence. Maybe they combine for like 8 games or something. We see a little spurt there. If Leighton Vander Esch can get healthy, this neck thing, it's worrisome we haven't had more updates with it this offseason. But, we saw him and Jalen Smith in 2018 just kind of leave the Saints just out of answers because they were so fast. And even Alvin Kamara, one of the best running backs in the league, just couldn't escape these guys. So front seven, that sneaky has some talent. Obviously, they didn't do anything to replace Byron Jones, but they didn't even have Byron Jones like shadowing number 1 wide receivers over the years. So if they are going to be able to replace a number 1 corner, you would think that they'll have an easier time doing that than, say, the Lions replacing Darius Slay, who just had a ton of responsibility on his plate every single game. So I wouldn't rank the Cowboys defense in the top 16 going this season, but I think they have the talent to finish up there.
Daigle, before you pick this game, we've seen Sean McVay make tons of changes this offseason. I mean, you've made so many of these changes to prepare for week 1. If we see some new looks, some new variations, some things from McVay that we've never seen before, and they do it against this suspect and questionable Dallas secondary. So, on the road, the Cowboys as favorites sure is telling from these sites and these places.
Yeah, it's a weird line, and thus I'm leaning the Rams less than a field goal, -2.5. But again, this is one that I do expect to be very close throughout.
We didn't even talk about the Cowboys. I mean, they are who they are. They bring back everyone from last year, but this isn't a team that made the playoffs last year, right? Like, we think that they were absolutely talented enough and scored enough points to make the playoffs, but they didn't do it. So that has to be a major change for them in order to, I think, live up to this 2.5-point line that they have here in week 1. All right. My last game is the first of the Monday Night Football contests of week 1. Pittsburgh Steelers, 3.5-point road dogs against the New York Giants. Let me pull up my notes here. Here we go. Look, Daniel Jones, I mean, he was a pleasant surprise. He got crushed during the entire draft process. Tons of groupthink, I included, where basically the internet made it out that he couldn't play. He showed that he can play, right? He showed a willingness to make big plays down the field, to hold on to the football probably longer than necessary. And that's where the issues came up. Blinders on. Everything else around his lone focus was, who am I going to throw the football down to once they get open? And he forgot about the other defenders trying to knock the football out of his hands. I'm not going to say he's on the Jameis Winston track, but if he was during his rookie year, I think that question comes up. And he's facing off against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Ian Hartitz, that was among the league's best last year. So it's a tough week 1 opponent for Daniel Jones in his sophomore game.
I cannot figure out why the Steelers are not getting better Super Bowl hype at this point. They have only the 12th best odds to try and win it all. Show me a single weakness on this team if Big Ben can stay healthy. And we don't even need him to go back to the 5,000-yard guy that he was as recently as 2018. If they can just be an average to above average offense, I think that defense is good enough at all 3 levels. Minka, Devin Bush, Hayward and Tuitt up the middle, TJ Watt on the outside, Hayden and Steven Nelson on the outside. We have talent everywhere, and there's young guys that have the potential to get even better in 2020. So just, again, the Steelers and Bills to me are 2 of the most complete teams in the AFC. I like both of their Super Bowl odds, honestly, as just longer shot bets because, we're seeing teams like San Fran, Green Bay, Minnesota, Seattle. They have better odds than these teams, but I just think we're still basing too much on 2019 and not what is to come in 2020.
And more to that point, the Steelers, per Warren Sharp's projected schedule, have the number 1 easiest schedule on offense throughout the year. I would be lying if I said I'm not extremely worried about Daniel Jones and Jason Garrett, who was removed from play calling duties in Dallas for a few years against this ferocious Steelers defense. And not only that, but it's a big first month. So this one win is super important because after this, they travel to Chicago, they face San Francisco, and then they go across country to the Rams in an early start. So it's a worrisome first month for Daniel Jones and this offense as a whole.
My internet is not doing well today. It is kind of the Ben Roethlisberger of the offseason, some might say. I mean, that Jay Glazer bomb that he dropped of – I've been in the gym more than Ben Roethlisberger's been in the gym this offseason. So we talk about worrisome. Ben Roethlisberger is worrisome. Despite being a veteran, what are we going to get from Ben Roethlisberger during this season? Because the offense cannot function without him. So who knows? Because of that, I'm going to go with an upset here. I'm going to take the Giants at home. That's what will be my pick. One of the upsets of the weekend.
I'm going Steelers. I'm sorry.
Ian, close this out. Tennessee Titans and the Denver Broncos. The Broncos 2-point favorites.
Ooh, so we've been talking up Drew Lock, all these speedy receivers they got, and the potential for this Broncos offense. That's fine. That's exciting, but we really don't even need Drew Lock to be anything more than okay for the Broncos to contend for like a wild card or something. Obviously, the Chiefs are the class of the AFC West. I don't think we're saying they're going to get a real challenge from the Broncos, but this defense is awesome. Look, the first 4 weeks of last season, they allowed at least 24 points 3 times. They were learning Vic Fangio's system, going through some things, figuring it out. The next 13 weeks, they only allowed 24 or more points 3 times. So this was truly a top 10 defense for the majority of last season. And now they're getting Bryce Callahan, who was the lead slot corner in Chicago for an amazing Fangio defense in 2018, missed the entire last season. They added Boye to help replace Chris Harris, who quietly wasn't all that great last season. I think it would be better not having to worry about Harris, getting his way and traveling with number ones. Fangio is historically preferred to leave, guys like Amukamara, Fuller on their sides, let them learn that. And now hopefully a full season from Bradley Chubb, who as a rookie is one of like 13 just future Hall of Famers. I'm not saying Chubb's will get there, but the list of rookies that had 12 sacks is just littered with complete studs. Bradley Chubb's one of those guys. I don't think those single blocks are going anywhere with Von Miller still doing his thing. So I think this Broncos defense could get back to being a top 3, top 5 unit in the entire league potentially. Now, I feel like this is a little scary like last year. We were kind of ignoring the Titans, who were the better team at the expense for a team that we've kind of hyped up a little more in the offseason. But, I'll get to my pick real quick. I got the Broncos -2.5 because at home in September, they won, 12 straight games at Mile High in September until last season, and they lost twice, both on last-second field goals. So, 2.5, we're saying the Titans on a neutral field are better. Maybe home field advantage doesn't even matter. We'll see how the fans thing works out. But right now, I got the Broncos.
It's just super interesting because it's 2 season-impactful storylines working against each other under the lights of the late game of Monday Night Football. On one hand, can the Titans' uber-efficient offense that led the entire league in play-action passing with Ryan Tannehill under center, behind the league's crown rushing champion, continue and sustain long-term? And on the other, can second-year Drew Lock keep the Broncos afloat as a playoff contender? And again, one game is not going to tell the entire story, but it'll start painting a picture for both sides. And that's why I'm just super excited to watch this game.
Ryan Tannehill in 2019, best season as a pro. Derrick Henry, best season as a pro, thanks to continuous, neutral and positive game scripts and great offensive line play. Obviously, A.J. Brown, we all want him, especially me and Ian, to get 11 targets per game. That would just be an absolute blast.
Why not me?
More excitement.
Oh, why am I excluded?
You're over here rooting for the Jaguars, man. Get out of here.
Well, just because DJ Shark gets 11 targets per game doesn't mean A.J. Brown can't get 11 targets.
I am just so suspect that this Titans team can do it again. I was all aboard. Like, I wanted them to make the playoffs last year. I was so happy to see them make noise. But I don't know, once again, if that's the type of team that you can bank on year over year over year as contenders. And they believe that they are of the ability to do that, or else they wouldn't have brought back these pieces. I don't know. Color me concerned, suspect, especially with Jack Conklin going and moving on, and them potentially not having the same immediate kind of blocking as they showed last year, which was the pivotal piece of being able to have that type of offense sustain success week to week.
Color me suspect of your internet.
Sorry.
You go on.
It'll be fixed by Thursday. I promise. I'll work on it for the next 2 days because I hate when stuff like this happens. I absolutely hate it. Ian, pick this game and let's get out of here.
Yeah, like I said, I got the Broncos 2.5. Just think they're better. I can see we saw last year how we saw the path to victory for the Titans, and they did it once. Doesn't mean they can't do it again. But yes, I mean, if every year, not every playoff team comes back. If you look across, the AFC, other than maybe the Patriots, I think the Titans stick out as the team that's likely to regress. So I got the Broncos.
You mentioned it. The season opening mile high effect is in full play here.
Yeah.
All right. That's going to do it for us. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you sticking with me throughout this episode. Again, sorry to everyone to spoil week 1. We did it. Hopefully I didn't spoil this podcast with my internet. I am going to chop up the audio so people out there do not even know what happened. The video, on the other hand, which you can check out 11:40 every single weekday. Right, John Daigle on NBC Sports Network.
Monday through Friday, 11:40 to noon. We are right there in the comfort of your homes, scaring you.
There we go. We'll be back on Friday morning with another episode of this very podcast with a subject to be named later. Hopefully in the text thread, we figure it out in time. For John Daigle, for Ian Harditz, I'm Josh Norris. Up the Villa. We'll talk to you soon.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.